tending each other's fires. To tend someone's fire is an act of love. It is to see their flames, not as a threat or a burden, but as a part of who they are. I think of my best friend, whose fire is both her strength and her struggle. She burns with a passion that can be overwhelming, even to herself. There have been times when she has called me in tears, consumed by the weight of her own flames. In those moments, I do not try to put out her fire. I do not tell her to calm down or to let go. Instead, I offer water, not to extinguish her flames, but to cool them, to help her find balance. And when my fire burns too hot, when I am overwhelmed by my own hunger, she does the same for me. We tend each other's fires, not by controlling them, but by being present, by offering warmth and light when the flames feel too much to bear. The fires that rebuild. There is a fire that does not destroy, but rebuilds. It is the fire of resilience, the spark that remains even after everything else has been reduced to ash. I have felt this fire in myself, in the moments when I thought I could not go on, when the weight of my storms felt unbearable. It is not as bright or dramatic as the flames of creation or ambition, but it is steady, unyielding, and I have seen it in others, in the way they rise from their struggles, stronger and more radiant than before. This fire is a reminder that even in our darkest moments, we carry the spark of renewal. Living with fire. To live with fire is to accept its contradictions. It is both a force of creation and a force of destruction, both a gift and a burden, but it is also to embrace possibility. Fire is the force that transforms, that illuminates, that connects. The fire within me burns brightly, and I will not hide it. I will tend it with care, share it with others, and let it guide me forward. The quiet flames. Not all fires are loud. Some burn quietly, steadily, their heat less visible, but no less significant. There is a man I know, a neighbor, older and retired, who spends his days tending to his garden. To the outside world, his life appears simple, uneventful, but when I stop to talk to him, when I ask about the roses he's pruning or the vegetables he's planting, his eyes light up with a spark that is unmistakable. His fire is in the act of creation, of nurturing life from the earth. It is not a fire that seeks recognition or applause. It does not roar or demand attention, but it burns just as brightly as any other. This man has taught me something important. Fire does not have to be grand to be meaningful. It does not have to set the world ablaze. Sometimes the quiet flames are the ones that sustain us. The fire of ambition. In contrast to the quiet flames are the fires that burn with relentless ambition. These are the fires that drive people to push beyond their limits, to chase dreams that feel impossibly out of reach. I have carried this kind of fire for much of my life. It is both exhilarating and exhausting, a force that propels me forward but leaves little room for rest. I see this fire in others too, in the young entrepreneur working late into the night, in the artist who sacrifices sleep and stability to pursue their vision, in the activist who marches for change, even when the odds seem insurmountable. This fire is powerful, but it is also dangerous. It can consume everything in its path, leaving nothing but ashes in its wake. I once knew a woman whose fire of ambition burned so brightly it seemed almost blinding. She was brilliant, driven, unstoppable. She built a career that others envied, achieved goals that most people only dream of. But she was always running, always chasing, always looking for the next spark to feed her flames. She never stopped to tend her fire, to ensure it burned sustainably. And one day it consumed her. She burned out, her energy depleted, her passion extinguished. It was heartbreaking to witness, but it taught me an invaluable lesson. Ambition without reflection is a fire without boundaries. To carry this fire is to walk a fine line between creation and destruction. It is to learn when to let the flames roar and when to let them rest. The shared flame. There is a particular kind of fire that can only be created when two people share their flames. I remember a time when I experienced this firsthand. It was with a close friend, someone whose fire burned in a way that was entirely different from mine. Where my fire was intense and focused, hers was playful and spontaneous. She had a way of bringing lightness to everything she touched, of turning even the most mundane moments into something extraordinary. One evening, as we sat together talking, our fires seemed to merge. The conversation flowed effortlessly, our ideas sparking off each other, igniting new possibilities we hadn't considered before. It was as if our combined flames created a light that was greater than the sum of its parts. This is the beauty of shared fire. It does not diminish when it is given. It grows. The flames we tend for others. To tend someone else's fire is a profound act of love. It is to recognize their light, to nurture it, to help it burn more brightly without trying to control it. I think of my friend whose fire has always burned quietly, overshadowed by the louder flames of those around him. For years he doubted himself, unsure if his fire was enough. It wasn't until I sat with him, listened to him, reminded him of the value of his light, that he began to see his fire for what it was. Tending his fire did not require grand gestures. It required presence, patience, and the willingness to reflect his light back to him. In tending his fire, I also learned to tend my own, the fires that burn together. There is a moment when two fires come together, not to compete, but to burn in harmony. I have felt this in my closest relationships, in the rare and precious connections where both people's flames are allowed to shine fully. These relationships are not always easy. Fire, by its nature, is unpredictable. It can flare too brightly, overshadowing one flame or leaving another feeling diminished. But when the balance is right, when both fires are tended with care, the result is something extraordinary, a light that illuminates not just the individuals, but the space between them, the fire of loss. Fire is not always a force of creation. Sometimes it is a force of destruction. I have felt this in the fire of loss, in the searing pain of grief that burns through everything, leaving only ashes behind. When my relative passed away, it felt as though a flame had been extinguished. They were a person whose fire burned with quiet strength, a steady light that had guided our family. In the wake of this loss, I struggled to find meaning in the fire that remained. It felt wild, chaotic, out of control. But over time, I began to see that their fire had not disappeared. It had transformed, passing into the hearts of those who loved them, shaping us in ways we could not yet fully understand. The fire of loss is not the end, it is a beginning, a chance to rebuild from the ashes. Living as fire. To live as fire is to live with contradiction. It is to be a force of creation and destruction, of connection and isolation, of light and heat. But it is also to live with purpose. Fire is the force that drives us forward, that pushes us to grow, to create, to connect. I no longer fear my fire. I no longer see it as something that sets me apart. I see it for what it is, a gift, a responsibility, a part of the larger blaze that connects us all. The mirror and the lie. The mirror does not lie. That is the lie. We speak of mirrors as truth tellers, unfiltered and pure, but I have come to understand them as collaborators in our greatest deceptions. Mirrors do not show us who we are, they show us what we have been trained to see. I used to stand in front of the mirror and recite my certainty, the posture of confidence, the well practiced neutrality, the curated expression of composure. But the mirror does not correct you, it reflects the narrative you bring. If you stand there convinced you are whole, it will not argue. If you stand there knowing you are falling apart, it will nod in agreement. The mirror is complicit. I remember a morning, one of those long grey mornings where the world feels pre-written and the weather insists on echoing your interior. When I stood in the bathroom for what must have been an hour, I wasn't grooming, I wasn't preparing. I was trying to reconcile the image with the sensation. The human in the mirror looked fine, alert, even rested. But I was none of those things. Inside, I was folded in on myself, a collection of brittle thoughts, barely holding their shape. I was so tired, tired of speaking, tired of smiling, tired of pretending that this face, this performance was still mine. But the mirror made no objection. It did not challenge me. It held up the facade and waited for me to leave. That's the problem with mirrors. They show you surface. And if you're clever enough, trained well enough, traumatized long enough, you can maintain surface indefinitely. I have. The eyes tell the truth, they say. Perhaps, but even the eyes can rehearse. They can learn to hold focus. They can master the performance of warmth. They can simulate presence. What they cannot do is create meaning. For years, I believed the lie that how I looked was who I was, that if I presented strength, then strength would become real, that confidence could be reverse engineered, that if others saw a person who was whole, then wholeness would follow. It never did. Instead, I became alien to myself. I knew how to look stable, articulate, reliable, even charming. But underneath, I was a mess of contradictions. I felt fraudulent. Worse than that, I felt dislocated. There is nothing more disorienting than being inside a body that tells a story you no longer believe. The mirror is not evil, it is obedient. That's what makes it dangerous. It will never warn you when you've gone too far. It will never ask, are you sure this is you? It will never challenge the stories you project. In that way, it is like the people who love you but do not know how to see you. They praise your strength, your resilience, your perseverance. They celebrate your fire while you quietly drown. They reward your survival without asking what it cost. There is another kind of mirror, the human one, the rare person who reflects back, not your presentation, but your essence. They are few and they are terrifying. You meet them and suddenly the performance feels brittle. You speak and hear yourself as if for the first time. They listen, not for what you say, but for what you mean. And that listening is unbearable because it is honest. I have an ex, someone whose gaze didn't search for flaw or praise, but simply observed. With her, I couldn't hide. My gestures felt artificial, my jokes rehearsed. She didn't challenge me. That would have been easier. She just watched. And in this quiet watching, I unraveled. We didn't last. You can only endure so much truth without dissolving. There were times I considered covering the mirrors, draping them like mourning cloths, not out of superstition, but out of fatigue. I didn't want to see the face that others recognized. I wanted to know what existed behind it. But that is not what mirrors offer. Not these ones. They are tools of repetition. They teach you to maintain, to refine, to pass. In rooms without mirrors, I feel more real. I forget how I'm supposed to look. My hands move differently. My face softens. I breathe with less intention. It's strange that something so ordinary as a reflection can produce such vigilance. And it is vigilance. To be watched, even by yourself, is to be policed. To anticipate judgment. To prepare defense. There is no rest under surveillance, even when the eye is your own. Now I treat mirrors like fire, carefully and with intention. I use them when necessary, not as oracles, not as guides, as tools. Tools can be useful, but they are not to be trusted with meaning. The meaning must come from somewhere else, from voice, from silence, from the way the body moves when no one is looking, from the pulse of recognition that needs no reflection. These days, I spend more time looking outward, at trees, at windows, at strangers' faces. I watch the way the world reflects itself without effort, how the wind moves through leaves without rehearsal, how laughter erupts without symmetry, how faces wrinkle and shift without apology. There is no mirror there, only motion, only presence. And in that presence, I find pieces of myself, not reflected, not measured, just felt enough to know I still exist, even when the mirror forgets. Closing reflection for chapter 7. The fire in others reflects the fire in me. It reminds me that we are all part of the same great dance, each carrying our own unique flames. To those who carry fire within you, let it burn, let it illuminate your path and the paths of those around you. And when your fire flickers, when it feels like it might go out, look to the fires of others. They will remind you that you are not alone. The fire connects us all. Chapter 8. The water that sustains. There is a moment just after the rain begins when the air shifts. It becomes heavy but not oppressive, saturated with a calm that is both grounding and unsettling. That is the essence of water, not to overwhelm, but to remind us of its presence, its inevitability. I have always thought of myself as a creature of fire, shaped by its hunger, driven by its heat. But as I have grown, I have come to see that fire alone cannot sustain. Fire is energy, but energy without direction consumes itself. It is water that provides the balance, that tempers the flames, that ensures the fire does not burn itself out. And yet, water is more than a counterbalance. It is not merely the shadow of fire, the force that tames it. Water has a life of its own, a power that runs deeper than anything fire can claim. It is not passive, as I once thought, nor is it predictable. It is a force of transformation, a quiet guide, an unrelenting truth, the stillness of water. There is a pond near my childhood home, tucked away behind a line of trees that were always half dead, their branches gnarled and bare even in spring. The pond was small, its surface covered in green algae that shimmered in the sunlight. To most people, it was unremarkable, a forgotten corner of nature, stagnant and insignificant. But to me, it was a sanctuary. I would go there when the fire in me grew too strong, when the world felt too loud, too fast, too demanding. I would sit by the edge of the water and let its stillness seep into me. The pond did not judge. It did not ask for anything. It simply was. Its surface reflected the sky above, the trees around it, and when I leaned close enough, the face I often tried to escape. Water has a way of showing you things you do not want to see. It holds up a mirror, not to the world you pretend to inhabit, but to the truths you carry within you. In the stillness of the pond, I saw my own restlessness. I saw the fire that drove me, the fire that I had always believed was my greatest strength. But I also saw its cost, the way it consumed my energy, my focus, my relationships. The water did not tell me to abandon the fire. It did not ask me to change. It simply reflected, allowing me to see myself more clearly than I ever had before. And in that reflection, I found something I had not expected: forgiveness. The weight of water. Stillness is only one side of water's nature. The other side is its weight. When water rises, it does not ask for permission. It does not wait for you to prepare. It comes with a force that is undeniable, unstoppable, overwhelming. I have felt this weight many times in my life, though I did not always recognize it for what it was. There was a time when I was drowning, though I did not realize it at first. The fire in me had burned out, extinguished by the flood of doubt and fear that had crept into my mind. I felt as though I was sinking, pulled under by a force I could not fight. The water was relentless. It pressed against me, heavy and suffocating, refusing to let me rise. For months, I floated in this darkness, unable to find my footing, unable to see a way forward. But water, for all its weight, is not cruel. It does not drown for the sake of drowning. It carries you, even when you cannot see it. Looking back, I can see that the water was teaching me something I could not have learned in any other way. It was showing me the limits of my fire, the parts of myself I had ignored for too long. It was forcing me to confront the shadows I had tried to escape. And when I finally stopped fighting, when I let the water carry me instead of pulling against it, I began to rise, the currents beneath. Water is not always still, nor is it always heavy. Sometimes it moves with a quiet persistence, shaping the world in ways we cannot see. The river that runs through my city is a perfect example of this. Its surface is calm, almost placid, but beneath that calm are currents strong enough to pull you under. I have walked along that river many times, watching its slow, steady progress. It seems unchanging, eternal. But the truth is that the river is always moving, always carving new paths, reshaping the land with every passing moment. The same is true of the water within us. There are currents beneath my surface that I do not always understand. They guide me in ways I cannot predict, pulling me toward places I would not have chosen on my own. At times, this is frustrating. I want to control the flow, to decide where the water takes me. But water does not work that way. It moves where it must, and it asks you to follow. And when I let go of my need for control, when I trust the currents to carry me, I find myself in places I could not have reached on my own, the reflection of others. Water is not only a mirror for ourselves, it is a mirror for the people around us. I see this most clearly in my closest relationships, the way their water reflects mine, the way we carry each other's doubts and fears without realizing it. There is a friend I have known for years, someone whose water runs deep and quiet. She is not one to speak of her struggles openly, but I see them in the way she moves, the way she pauses before she speaks, the way her eyes flicker with emotions she cannot name. Her water reflects my own, showing me parts of myself I might otherwise ignore. And when I share my own reflections with her, I see her begin to understand herself more clearly. This is the gift of water. It connects us, not through words, but through understanding. The patience of water. Fire moves quickly, demanding action and resolution. Water moves slowly, teaching us to wait, to trust the process, to let go of our need for immediate answers. There was a time when I could not understand this patience. I wanted solutions, not reflection. I wanted to move forward, not to sit with my doubts. But water has its own rhythm, and it will not be rushed. I think of the times when I have tried to force the water to move faster, to give me the clarity I craved. Each time it pushed back, reminding me that growth cannot be hurried. And so I am learning to wait, to trust that the water will reveal its truths in its own time and that those truths will be worth the wait. Living as water. To live as water is to embrace its contradictions. It is to be still and in motion, heavy and light, reflective and transformative. It is to carry the weight of your doubts without letting them drown you. It is to reflect on your experiences without being trapped by them. It is to move with the currents, trusting that they will carry you where you need to go. Pressure is a language. Pressure isn't merely weight, it's instruction. It tells you how to behave, how to perform, how to contort your existence into a shape that others find palatable. It is constant, invisible, intimate. Pressure is not the shout, It is the whisper that rewrites your posture. From the outside, people see it as drive. They mistake pressure for motivation. They applaud the way you meet deadlines, the way you speak fluently, even when your mind is crumbling, the way you carry yourself as though gravity is a suggestion. They don't realize that pressure is not a choice, it's an atmosphere. I have been breathing it for so long, I can no longer tell where the pressure ends and I begin. It begins young, before you have language for it, before you even know the name for ambition or fear. It starts with expectation, with how people look at you when you speak your first clever sentence, with the way adults react when you show signs of being special. The praise comes early, and with it, a contract. Continue to impress, and we will continue to love. You do not sign it, but you comply, and so you learn the rules. Be extraordinary, be articulate, be right, be gracious while being brilliant, be tireless, be kind but not naive, be clever but not arrogant. And above all, never falter, never let them see the strain. That is the language of pressure, a dialect of performance. Pressure taught me to listen closely, not to what people said, but to what they expected. I could sense it in silences, in smiles that lasted 1 second too long, in compliments that came with invisible strings. I learned to adapt before I was even asked. I learned to preempt. People love that about you when you anticipate their needs, when you adjust to the room without being told. They call it emotional intelligence. They call it empathy. They don't call it what it really is, erasure, because every time you contort, a part of you disappears. Not violently, not even noticeably, but slowly until you realize that you haven't spoken honestly in weeks, that your shoulders are always tight, that your smile feels rehearsed, that your laughter arrives half a second too late, searching for authenticity. This is what pressure does. It shapes you, it bends your sentences, it writes your scripts, and when you try to speak freely, it interrupts, it corrects, it reminds you who you're supposed to be. There are moments, even now, when I freeze in conversation, not because I don't know what I think, but because I am calculating which version of the truth will keep the air light, will keep the connection intact, will maintain the peace. That is the deepest wound pressure leaves. The inability to speak without editing, the constant presence of the watcher, the belief that being yourself is a risk. And yet, I excelled, I climbed ladders, I earned titles. I was the kind of success story people like to parade. And with each achievement, the pressure increased. Because once you've proven you can fly, no one asks if your wings hurt. They assume you are built for flight, and if you fall, they call it a tragedy, not a consequence. There is no refuge from pressure in high achievement, only camouflage. The more competent you appear, the more invisible your suffering becomes. You are no longer permitted weakness. Vulnerability becomes indulgence, and so you endure until endurance becomes identity, until you no longer know how to live without the push of pressure against your back. I've begun to notice how my body carries it, how my jaw clenches even in sleep, how my breath shortens when I open my email, how my stomach tightens before any conversation that might require even mild honesty. The body doesn't lie, it remembers the weight, even when the mind forgets. Sometimes I wonder what I would be without pressure, who I would be. Would I still write? Would I still push for precision in my thoughts, my words? Or have I been chasing excellence not for joy, but to survive, not for meaning, but for permission to exist? It's a terrifying question. What if my greatness is only a symptom of my fear? I know how to perform freedom. I know how to write about liberation in perfect, painful prose. but I do not know how to live it. My mind still scans every room for the shape I'm supposed to become. Even in solitude, I perform. Even now, writing this, I am aware of the reader. I am choosing my cadence, modulating the rhythm of confession. Pressure is that deep. It is not external, it is internalized. It has become part of the infrastructure. And yet, I am trying to pause before answering, to speak without rehearsing, to let silence hang unfilled, to disappoint people gently, to say no even when I could say yes, to write for myself even when the words arrive misshapen, to rest not as strategy, not to become more productive, but as an act of refusal, because pressure may be a language, but I do not have to speak it forever. I can learn new ones, ones built in the dialect of ease, of uncertainty, of play, ones that do not require perfection as proof of worth. I am not free yet, but I am loosening, and that for now is enough. Closing reflection for chapter 8. Water is not the absence of fire, it is its complement, its guide, its sustainer. To those who carry water within you, let it flow, let it reflect your truths and carry you forward. And when the fire burns too brightly, when the weight of the world feels overwhelming, trust the water to sustain you. The water connects us all,